Well, hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to Perspectives in Professional Psychology. I am really excited about tonight's guest. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight, we're going to talk with Dr. Hector Adames. Dr. Adames is a professor of counseling psychology at the Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology program in Chicago, which is part of the College of Professional Psychology at the Chicago School. And so tonight, we're going to talk about practice and Dr. Adames's book, Succeeding as a Therapist, How to Create a Thriving Practice in a Changing World. And like I said, really excited to talk to Dr. Adames. He's a fantastic psychologist, educator, mentor, and award-winning scholar. Dr. Adames, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start with the book and the inspiration behind it. What motivated you and your co-authors to write the book, Succeeding as a Therapist?
Yeah, that's a good question. We are a group of, there's four of us, and we are from very different backgrounds, gender, racial ethnic background, generation. And so that's Dr. Nayeli Chavez, who's actually also a professor at the Chicago School, Dr. Ken Pope, and Dr. Melba Vasquez, who's a past APA president. So we're very different in so many ways, but what really drew us together is our values, right? We have very similar values, and no surprise then why all four of us are psychologists. And we were thinking about how much the world is changing, how much technology is changing, right? And how much our own country has been changing in so many different ways. So we thought about like, what does it take to be successful as a therapist,
Mm.
right? At the start of this new millennium. So that's really kind of like the impetus that grounded our work together. And what we did was what we wanted to come up with bite-sized chapters, right? That if you had the four of us in your pocket, what would they tell me? And that was really the post or the lighthouse that guided us in terms of our work, thinking about ways to support current and the next generation of psychologists, therapists, counselors, etc. Yeah.
Well, I love the topic succeeding as a therapist because there are so many ways to be a therapist, right? There's private practice, there's consulting, there's mentorship, there's working with community organizations, teaching students. But when you think about kind of your history, Dr. Adames, and your professional experiences, what what do you, what about those experiences kind of shape your views on what it means to be a successful therapist today?
Oh goodness, that's such a good question. So many things have shaped my path. One of them is my mentors, right? That's one of them. My own family, right? I do a lot of this work because of the love and support of my family, but also the curiosity that I've always had, right? And I always tell future students and current students and my mentees and advisees, like, what are you curious about? Right? What ignites that curiosity? And that will just take it into so many different places in our field. And one of the beauties of psychology is that we could do so many different things within the field. So the curiosity person that I've always been has really kept me grounded in the field. And igniting and nurturing that curiosity, I think, has made me successful as a therapist, successful as an educator, as a researcher, as a writer, as a person. Yeah.
Yeah, I think back about my experiences and, you know, different periods of my career, particularly early on. I don't know that I would have described myself as a successful therapist, um, even though now in hindsight, I can look back and appreciate more of the successes I had. And I think, you talk about your mentors and the relationships that you've had over the years. And I think for me today, as I look back, I can say with pretty rock solid certainty that it is those relationships that I've had, those mentors that have helped me see the opportunities, help me understand what my capabilities were and are and how I could contribute. So I really appreciate that perspective because sometimes if we don't reflect on those relationships and how they've helped us grow as a therapist, as a
Mhm.
psychologist, I think it can obscure our view of the success that we've had and dampen our understanding of what success means when it comes to being a psychologist.
Absolutely, because oftentimes people think of success as me, myself, and I did this, right? And not
Yeah,
really paying honor to, the community that helped you be quote unquote successful. And
100%.
also that success is going to look different for different folks.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to appreciate. There's not like you could open up the dictionary and read a definition of success, but um, what it means to be successful is very individualized. And I think that it's important to understand that. I think one of the things that I've run into over the years for myself, and I feel like I hope that maybe I've grown out of this some, but I would get caught up in comparing myself to other therapists, to other psychologists, and use that as a measuring stick for whether or not I was successful. And I feel like what I've learned over time is that's a deeply flawed methodology for gauging my success. That I've got to look at it on my terms and what does it mean for me as an individual, as a psychologist, as a person in the world to be successful. And I feel like I'm settling into that now after I've been out of school 20 plus years. But yeah, it's been a gratifying journey for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a journey that goes on and on and on. And I usually tell folks, around the construct or the idea of success that look inward, right?
Yeah,
What's your values? What are your values? What are you envisioning? Have you taken time to pause and to envision what is it that you want to do with your life? What is it that you want to do with your career? And work towards that. And that closer you get to that vision of possibilities that you created, right? That's what we should be measuring and not
yeah.
comparing ourselves to others. So I really resonated with your description that it's important to not compare ourselves to others. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's that inward view that's so important. That's an important piece of development as a person, particularly as a mental health practitioner, psychologist. It's looking inside and understanding yourself and your values and what's important to you, what principles do you want to live by on a day-to-day basis. And I go, it's cliche, but it's so true. And I always forget who to attribute the quote to, but comparison is the thief of joy. So let's just set the comparison with other therapists aside as much as we can and judge our own success by, like you said, the values, the principles, the relationships that we have.
Yeah.
When we think about being a therapist, there are a lot of different kind of avenues for that. But one of the things that I think most people go to school for, get that degree and become licensed is the business side of it, right? Because I think a lot of us who get into the field do it because we believe in the value, we have a helping orientation, and that's fantastic. I think that's part of being a successful therapist. It's hard to be successful if you don't kind of have those initial attributes that bring you into the field. But to be able to do that on a sustained basis, we also have to pay attention to the business side of things. And I think a lot of people who have that kind of deep helping orientation struggle with the business side. A lot of therapists struggle with the business side of things. So, could you talk a little bit about what some of the common mistakes you see early career therapists making when they set up a practice or whatever that might be? But what are some of those early mistakes and how can early career therapists avoid them?
Yeah, good question. I think when I'm going to talk about practice today, I'm going to talk about practice broadly, right? So, folks who might be interested in opening up their own business, their own private practice, folks, and practice also as folks who are working within an organization, within a hospital, within a community mental health center. So, just practice in general. But regardless of which avenue you want to go down, right, or whatever's part of your vision, of your possibilities. I think a big mistake that a lot of us have done, including me, is that we go into the field not thinking about what's my strategy and what's my plan, right? So we just go in, we all have the Mother Teresa syndrome. We all are good people, we are well intentioned, right? We're really good hearted, want to support the communities and the people we serve. But we also have loans to pay, we have bills, right? We have life.
Yeah. There's some
Um,
financial realities.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in graduate school, I think one thing we don't do well, no matter which graduate program we go into, is that we really don't speak about the financial business side of our field. And I think we do a great disservice to our students when
Yeah.
we do that. I know in counseling psychology in my PD class, we do talk about that. They're looking at me like, why are we talking about this? Because I'm like, this is important. This is important,
Yeah.
as important as it is our ethics and our research and all these other pieces. And I think there is a shift. And I know here at the Chicago School, we're trying to do that shift to help students really think about also the business side of the helping profession. But one of those mistakes is what's our goal, right? What's our
Yeah.
strategy? So I think of the goals and the strategy as the what. What is it that I'm trying to accomplish? And that could include having a flourishing practice. That could include being an educator. That it could include being a supervisor, right? And then the plan or the tactic is how am I going to get there,
Mhm.
right? How am I going to get there? So thinking of strategies and thinking of a plan is one of those areas that a lot of us don't put a lot of time and energy into. And I think if we start thinking about our strategy and our plan early on, even right now, for folks who are interested in going into the field, I think you're going to be ahead of the curve when it comes to your career, right? Without a strategy, we're not going anywhere. And without a plan, right? So the
Right.
plan is like the specific things that I'm going to do to get there. We're really gonna not go where we need to go or where we want to go. So I think that's a big piece that a lot of us tend not to do earlier on in our career.
Yeah, I have definitely made that mistake. It's the idea that, well, I'm a psychologist. I'll just start seeing people. I'll just start a practice. And I mean, you can do it that way, right? But it is cart before the horse. Unfortunately, that I'm a kind of cart before the horse type of guy. But yeah, that strategy is so critical. Having a plan about how you're going to go about your day-to-day business, how you're going to run the operations of your business, whether that's a private practice or a consulting business or whatever it might be. And you talked a little bit about the plan, a business plan. Could you maybe break that down a little bit and walk us through what a therapist informed business plan looks like?
Absolutely. It is boring to
That's
talk
the
about.
hard part, right? It's not a ton of fun.
Which is why I think a lot of us is like, what are they even talking about business plan? But really, a business plan is a fancy kind of word to mean putting my ducks in a row in order for me to reach a goal. What are the things? What are the basic building blocks that I need in order to achieve an outcome?
Yeah.
Right. And all of us in our field, right, I encourage folks and I invite folks to think about a business plan. And a business plan, I don't want folks to get confused to think it's like you own your own business, but think about the business plan as your business as a therapist. The soul work that you're doing as a psychologist, as a therapist, as a school psychologist, as a
Mhm.
counseling psychology student, so forth and so on, right? So, what are the things that I need to think about ahead in order for me to be successful in my career, right? What kind of liability insurance do I need? Do I need to have an attorney? Do I need to hire an attorney if I'm going to be doing my own private practice? What about a website, right? Who's going to build a website for me? What's going to be my logo? What's going to be my slogan, right? What's going to be the mission and the values of my practice, of my business in terms of a private practice, but also what is your mission as an individual practitioner? if you're applying for a job, right? So a business plan are all the different pieces that you need to kind of think about ahead of time in order to set you up for success, right?
Yeah.
So it's a plan that is not fixed. You could tweak it as you learn, as you continue in the field, right? But it's really it's there's steps, there's actions that I need to take in order for me to get closer to that vision that I have of myself being a successful practitioner.
Yeah. How do I get paid? Where's the money going to go? How do I manage that? One of the things I want to kind of bring it back to something you mentioned earlier that I think could be an important part of a plan, of a strategy for a therapist, but I'm curious on your take because you mentioned mission and a vision. And you talked about the importance of values for a therapist. Do you feel like kind of in your overall strategy in that business plan that you should interweave your values as a therapist as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's important to be transparent and authentic with the
Yeah.
community and the people that we serve. And I think that authenticity and sharing our values with the public in a way is a way to do some informed consent to the
Yeah.
public in terms of who you are as a practitioner, what's your philosophy, what's the lens that you bring into the work that you do,
Yeah.
right? It's a way of sharing with the world a little bit about who you are as a practitioner. So I often see your values, right? I think of values as the things and the mission statement as like the paragraph that brings all those pieces together where you're describing your values to the
Yeah.
public. And that's a great way to paint a picture about the work that you do or that you're the kind of service you're providing.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've I've found myself over the years, when I working as a psychologist, kind of having what I felt was kind of a value system that I wanted to work around, but I didn't really have it articulated really tightly on paper. And what's happened to me a number of times without having done that is you start taking clients.
Mhm.
And pretty soon, I think if you're not careful, just because of what's coming to you in terms of clients or business opportunities, there's this urge kind of going back to the money side of things to say, that would be great. Maybe I should take that on and not referencing that back to does this actually fit the values I have as a therapist? And what's happened to me a couple times is I found myself in a situation where I wasn't happy with what I was doing. And I had to ask myself, how did I get here? And I really believe now pretty firmly that it was because I didn't have those values really well articulated in a way that I could go and revisit them
Absolutely.
and remind myself, okay, yes, this is an opportunity, but it doesn't really necessarily align with my mission, with my values, with my vision for what I want to do as a therapist. And so I think for me, that's been important to just have my values there front and center and ask myself, okay, is this aligned? Is this aligned? Is this aligned? Because I think that could be a real danger for a therapist. If you don't do that, you could find yourself burned out and unhappy and wondering what turn you took at what point to get there.
Right. Or even worse, you might do harm
Yeah,
to
that's
the
a great
client that you're
point.
serving.
Probably the most important point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we all have different values. And I think it's important for us to meditate, journal, draw, whatever it is that we do, run and think as we're running, right? Whatever it is that you do to kind of get in touch with yourself and really begin to ask yourself, what are my values, right? To start that journey of really uncovering what your values are and write them down. So I'm a neuropsychologist by training. I'm going to put on my neuropsych hat on, right? There is science, right? There's research to support that when we write down things, we're more likely to remember them because the brain encodes that information and then we're able to retrieve it later on. Okay, that's enough for our talk today, right? But writing things down is powerful,
Yeah.
right? It's powerful. It's out there. You can look at it. You're more likely to remember it. You're more likely to go back to revisit it. So I always tell my students and people that I mentor and supervise, write things down, right? Write your values down, right?
Yes.
Doesn't mean if you wrote them down that you can't erase them, you can tweak them. Of course, you always could, but getting into that habit so that when we are encountered in a situation, we could always fall back to our values and have an honest conversation with ourselves and say, is this gig that I'm being offered, is this opportunity that I'm being offered, does it align with my values? Does it align with my vision of what it means to be a successful, ethical practitioner? And sometimes, if we're really honest, the answer is no, right? Because not all money is good money.
That's
Not
right.
all money is good money. And for us as folks in the mental health profession, one value that we all have in common, right, is that we're going to help without harming people.
Yep.
We're going to care without hurting people, right? That's the core of our ethics. And that's a value that we all hold, right? I know that we all hold this at the Chicago School, and I know
Mhm.
we all hold this in psychology, right? So that's one value you could start writing down, right? Am I helping without hurting? Am I caring without harming? And if the answer is you are, then that's not good money. That's not a good opportunity. Run away, go to the other side because it doesn't align with our values as practitioners, as folks in the helping profession. And then you will go through that exercise through each of your value.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like you said, the value structure can kind of morph and shift as you develop and mature as a therapist. But that one that you just mentioned that should be at the top, that one probably should be kind of locked in concrete at the top of every value list. First, do no harm.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So shift a little bit. I think it's pretty well known. It's certainly well documented that the prevalence of mental health challenges has been going up. And we had this challenge before COVID hit, and it's only accelerated since COVID. So we know that with that acceleration, it's become harder and harder for therapists to kind of keep up with the demand. Now, if anything good came out of COVID, would be increased access through, teletherapy opportunities. But that comes with its own set of challenges. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you see as some of the longer term implications of this shift to a teletherapy model for therapists and clients.
Yeah, I would say that I agree with you. One of the, if we could say, good thing that came out of the pandemic was that we had to quickly shift and to think creatively. How can we use the technology that we have to continue to provide services to folks? I think that's one thing that came out of it. And I think another piece that came out of COVID is that it underlined, highlighted again that we still have a lot of racial health disparities in our
Mhm.
country. And we really saw that COVID-19 really kind of highlighted that again. I would say that the shift in telehealth, I do agree, COVID did accelerate that. And that brings up a lot of exciting opportunities, right? I know different states have been. I know in psychology we have psych pack, so different states you could practice, you could be licensed in different states if you're part of the site pact. So I think it's making different organizations think creatively. How can we bring down some of these barriers for folks to receive the healthcare that they need? I also think it might have made it easier for some folks that it's hard for them to leave their homes, right? That now we could just go into their world virtually and provide services. So I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities. And I think as the years continue to go by, I think we're going to see a growth and a boom in this area, which is great because there's more need for mental health services than we have practitioners. right? So I always tell my students, unfortunately, we have job security
You're
in
right.
this field because there's just so much pain and trauma and
Yeah.
suffering that are going on in the world for so many different reasons. But I think some other implication, again, when it comes to doing no harm, is to thinking about crossing boundaries, thinking about confidentiality,
Yeah.
right? Thinking about how do we assess for risk when we're providing services virtually. What does it mean if you're providing services across state lines? So, so there's a lot of advantages, a lot of excitement, but also some other areas that I think we need to think more deeply about some implications of providing services remotely.
Yeah. One of the things maybe to go a layer deeper that I've thought about a lot when it comes to teletherapy. I've done a little bit of teletherapy just out of necessity, but my practice has always been rooted in the in-person experience.
Mhm.
I love having this conversation with you tonight here on Zoom, right? It's a great way to connect with people, but I've always felt that being in the room, that the relationship and the energy of being in the room with someone is different than talking to them via a virtual platform like
Yeah.
Zoom or some of the other kind of HIPAA compliant teletherapy options that you referenced earlier. That's an important consideration. Do you do you have any kind of concerns? Obviously, the expanded access, there are always costs and benefits, right?
Right.
Teletherapy has greatly expanded access, but do you have some concerns about how teletherapy maybe impacts the therapeutic relationship?
I love that question because I still provide services. And of course, all my clients, I had to shift them over to virtual platform during the pandemic. Technically, we're still in the pandemic, right? But like post the big,
Right.
crisis that we all collectively experience, or should I call it collective trauma that we all
Mhm.
experience. Some of my clients wanted to stay virtually
Yeah.
and did not want to go back into the office. And with those clients, and of course this is completely anecdotal, I felt the same as if I was still seeing them in the office. So I think we need to do research to see how the therapeutic relationship evolves or changes when you start in person, then you go virtual, versus when you start virtual and stay virtual and then and you start virtual and then go in person. I mean, right? If there's any future students in the audience, that's a great dissertation to kind of look into, or a great study to connect with one of our faculty members to explore, right? Because I don't think at least I haven't read any science that looks at if it changes, how so, and if there's one modality that might be more beneficial than the other. Anecdotally, I felt like, again, folks that I was seeing in the office and then we went virtual and I've asked them, right? We both felt things continued to go smooth sailing, broadly
Mhm.
speaking, versus folks that were new that I just started virtual. I felt like it was harder for me to make that connection virtual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And then now I think after you and I have our conversation, I'm gonna go take a look at the literature and see what's been done so far because that's such an important question to answer.
Yeah.
Because that therapeutic relationship, you're right. I mean, if you can build it successfully virtually and the outcomes are there, then the benefits of expanded access, I think, far outweigh any of the challenges of doing therapy virtually.
Absolutely. And then I think the other piece is what do we mean by therapeutic relationship or the therapeutic alliance, right? And I know like graduate school, oftentimes we talk about it and it's a very abstract, nebulous word. And being someone who's guided by science, I go back to the research, to the psychotherapy research. And really at the end of the day, the therapeutic alliance is beautiful. It sounds like a homework card, right? But really what it is does the client feel and believe that we are trustworthy? And I think if we use the science to kind of think about and ask ourselves as practitioner, do I have the best interest in mind for the client? And how am I showing the client that I am trustworthy? Right? What do I need to do more of? What do I need to do less of in order for me for me to be able to let the client know, understand, feel that I am a trustworthy person, that is, right? That's the root of the therapeutic relationship. And if we're able to do that, and I believe we can virtually, then I think, we might start to see very little difference between in person and virtual. Yeah,
Yeah. I think there may be for the therapist who isn't as well versed with that kind of teletherapy modality, obviously training is important, but it may be a thing that just takes time to develop facility with and comfort with. And so, yeah, it may be more about the therapist and less about the modality.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the example I usually give is that I see a lot of both new and seasoned clinicians that I've trained, and I'm like, so how do you start your session with your clients? And they often say, well, I want them to understand that this is a safe space. And I tell them that this is a safe space. And it's one of those practices that if you yourself have been in your own therapy or you're practicing or in training or want to be, that's something we all will agree on, right? But if we're really honest, right, when you're starting a new relationship with a client, is it really a safe space? It's not, right?
No.
We're really honest, it's not. So the responsibility falls on us as a practitioner in terms of how can then I make this space, right? A container, right? An
Yeah.
environment that the client says, hey, I trust that person. That person has the best interest in mind for me, right?
Yeah.
So the responsibility falls on us. And then the client gets to label whether or not that space is safe or
Yes.
not, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
You can say it all day, but if they don't feel it, it's not a safe space. No
right.
matter how much you say it, you've got to create the environment that helps them feel safe. And if you
Exactly.
do that, then you don't have to say it's a safe space.
Absolutely.
It's a felt sense, right?
Absolutely. And I tell my students, show me, don't tell me. Right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
when
Yes.
you're in
Yes.
the in a chair and you're providing services, whether it's virtual or in the office, I want you to ask yourself, how am I showing the client that I'm trustworthy? Not just say it.
Yeah.
It's
That's how
hard.
you earn it.
Yeah, it's hard, but that's the work.
Absolutely. You know, you touched on some of the gaps, particularly on like racial gaps and access to therapy and mental health challenges. And I know the research you do and the clinical work are really deeply rooted in cultural responsiveness. So I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about how therapists can build practices that are truly inclusive and culturally humble, not just in intention, but in actual practice, kind of going back to what we were talking about with creating a safe space, right? It's one thing to say that you have an inclusive and culturally humble practice, but how do you actually live that? How do you build that experience for clients?
Absolutely. It goes back, I guess, Dr. Garrison, this is one of our themes for tonight. It goes back to your values.
Okay.
Right? Do we value human rights? And if the answer is yes, then we need to find ways to become increasingly culturally responsive and racially conscious practitioners. To be culturally responsive, which means I'm going to integrate, right, the ways of being of my client that includes and honors my client's cultural background. That's what cultural responsiveness means. And then racially conscious is what does it mean for me to practice, right, in a culture that is organized around the culture of white supremacy? What does that mean for me? Who I am as a racial being? What does that mean for my client? And what does that mean for the dyad of us doing this work together? And cultural responsiveness and racially conscious practice is hard work because, again, it's inviting us to turn the lens inwards to ourselves and for us to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of who we are, what we've done, right? And what can we do better in order for us to more really honor and center human rights. One thing that keeps me at the Chicago School now for over 10 years is that we actually do this work here. At least in counseling psychology, I know we do this work, that it's not just part of our mission, it's not just part of our logo, right, on
Mm.
our values, but we really breathe this in every aspect of our curricula, whether it's research methods, and I teach research methods, whether it's in diversity class or whether it's in a clinical intervention course. We're really asking students to be curious about themselves and who they are as a cultural being, who they are as a racial being, and how that might be shaping their work, the important work that they're doing with their clients. So we work a lot on folks understanding who they are and for folks to really become healthy in their racial identity. Right. And we don't do that just because it's a Chicago school part of our mission and vision, but we do that because science tells us that when we are more culturally competent and we provide racially conscious care to clients, right? We understand, let's say, the racial disparities and the ways in which racism wounds and hurts people of color, for example. That client, that work, there's better treatment outcome. So why not do what's going to make the client heal? So it's part of our ethics. It's part of, we do this because science supports it. It's ethical. It's humane. But the work is hard, right? It's hard for every single one of us. It's not easy, but it starts with us making a commitment that this is part of my vision and part of my value as a professional in the helping profession, as a professional in psychology.
Yeah, that we've got a couple themes running through this because as you were talking about your perspective, I kept thinking again, it is that it's values and it's the willingness, the imperative almost to look inside and to understand your history, to better understand who you are. And it's not, it's that inward look is not to necessarily chastise yourself or find shame, but it's to understand who you are and how who you are relates to the given context that you find yourself in at any given moment. And it is really hard and
Mhm.
sometimes very painful,
Mhm.
but so critical to being a well developed, well rounded, effective, culturally humble therapist.
Absolutely. And we need to do that work. And I'm saying the word need to
Mhm.
because the people we serve deserve the best of us.
100% agree. Yeah. Yeah, and it's not a one time and done thing, right? It's not something you do while you're in graduate school and then you're set. It really does become a lifelong commitment.
Absolutely.
So, kind of being a therapist is hard, right? This is one aspect of being a therapist is hard. We know that because being a therapist is hard, it can be easy to either arrive at or begin to approach burnout. There's a big demand for our services. We want to help. So we often maybe kind of go beyond what's a reasonable capacity for our helping nature. And end up in burnout. It's unfortunately common. What kind of self-care strategies do you personally recommend, and how do you integrate community care in your own practice?
Yeah. So in my book, we have several chapters under the section of taking care of yourself and
Yeah.
your practice because this is pivotal. This is key. And the analogy I like to use is I always ask people, which organ does the heart pump blood to first? Do you know which organ does the heart pump blood to first, Dr. Garrison?
Yeah, you're gonna put me on the spot. My guess would be, well, I'll give you 2,
Yeah.
uh, the lungs or the brain.
Absolutely. And that is, if we were playing Family Feud, that would be the top two top answers that people will give, right? The
Yeah,
lung, because we need the oxygen to breathe, and our brain, because the brain is like the CEO of our body, right? But those two are actually not the correct answer. The correct answer is actually to the heart.
I knew it. I should have said heart.
So the heart pumps blood to itself first before it's able to take care of the other organs in the body. So I use this analogy, right, to remind myself, right, and I also do this with my students and also my patients, my clients, that you have to find time and you have to take care of yourself, right, in order for you then to be a healing process in the lives of other people.
Yeah.
That if the heart is not able to take care of itself, it can't do the important work of supplying blood to the rest of the organs,
Yeah.
right? So self-care is key, is right up there. Because if we're not taking care of ourselves, we're not providing the best level of care to our clients. And the other piece, then, when it comes to how do I do that, right? The answer is I don't know. Because
Mhm.
I think that self care is like a fingerprint. The same way every single one of us, we have unique fingerprints. I think our self care is also unique fingerprints. What I do know, again, based on research, is that self care doesn't mean I need to take a vacation for 7 days or 10 days and then come back. In fact, the research says that when we do that, the life, what is it, half life of that, in terms of how long that helps us, is only for, I think, oh my goodness, I'm blanking out on the stats. I think it's for a week. So however
Yeah.
you go for, that's how long, like, the benefits. So it's really not that helpful. So
Yeah.
instead, I like to think of self care as a ritual. The same ways in which we wake up, we brush our teeth, we clean our face, we take care of our body, we floss, right? You eat, right? You hydrate, right? I think of self care as a daily ritual. So I ask people, what is it? What is something that you could do daily
Yeah.
that it becomes part of your a daily ritual practice for you, and that is going to help you kind of decompress, could bring you some joy, that could help you connect with your pets, with your family, right? What is it that's going to bring you kind of that groundedness, that
Mhm.
joy, that moment of to breathe out, right? And then do that every day again and again and again,
Yeah.
right?
Could you talk a little bit about boundaries as they relate to self-care? Because I think that's one of the challenges I know I've had over the years, and I've seen other people have. But I think that daily ritual, that discipline of self-care can get out of sync. It can fall to the wayside if boundaries aren't set properly on a personal and professional level. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. I mean, boundaries within itself could be a form of self care,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, by 7 o'clock, I'm not going to be on my phone anymore. Boundary, right?
That's a hard one, but
It's a hard one, but it's an important right? Because,
yeah.
the light of our phone, we might start reading or scrolling on social media, right? So I think boundaries are healthy, right?
Yeah.
Boundaries are healthy. And I think we need to have healthy boundaries around our self-care. I think the same way we won't just wake up and leave our house the way we wake up, right? Like we'll take care of our bodies, bodily needs. I think we need to have a different relationship with whatever that ritual is that's going to keep us grounded, that's going to keep us not in the space of being fatigued because of the work that we're doing,
Yeah.
right? And being fatigued is, I think, a byproduct of the work that we do as therapists, right? And it's in those moments that then we really need to ramp up whatever it is that we're going to do to take care of ourselves, right? Self care. When it crosses over the line to burnout, we're in dangerous territory because there's a lot of research that suggests when we are feeling burnout, we're not providing good care to our clients. We are going to become resentful for the work that we're doing. We're more likely to make mistakes and so forth and so on. And that comes with a lot of liability, not only legal liability, but liability around the care that we're not providing to the folks that we're serving. So fatigue is normal, that compassion
Yes.
fatigue, right? That's part of the work. We have to put things in place so that we don't get we don't cross over the line to burnout. And for some of us, right, and I know there's some really good folks writing about community care, and it's how can you also be part of a community that's going to replenish you, that's going to pour back into you in order for you to come back and do the important work that you're doing as a practitioner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, maybe we have kind of a second value that should apply to all therapists. I know "should" is a dangerous word, but, the first one is do no harm, right? I will
Mhm,
do no harm as a
mhm,
value, and the second might be, I will engage in good self care to be my best for the people that seek my help.
Absolutely.
Well, Dr. Adamas, I know we're coming up on time, but want to ask you at least one more question if I
Yeah,
can.
absolutely.
I think we have a number of people joining us live tonight. Some of them might be students or they might be thinking about pursuing a graduate degree in the mental health profession like counseling psychology. If you were a graduate student today or a new clinician and you're listening to our conversation tonight, what's one piece of advice that you would offer them as they begin to look toward building their career as a therapist?
Mm. I would say it's really important for you to find your people. Find who's your squad, right? Create a community. Don't find a community, create a community, right? Because doing this work is so rewarding in so many ways. It's beautiful work. It's hard, challenging. And one of those challenges is that this work is very lonely. The work that we do is very lonely, but you don't have to do the work alone. So it's really important to create a community that's going to support you during the good times and celebrate those important milestones, right? When you've reached some of those strategic visions that you've had, but also when we're in the valley and when things get really hard and challenging, right? And the opposite of loneliness is social belonging. So create a community that you feel that you could belong.
Yeah.
And one of the exciting things about graduate school is that it's one of the last opportunities that we have kind of formalized, organized way that the ingredients are perfect in order for us to create that kind of community. I know that's something I truly miss about being in graduate school. And I think the second advice or the second pearls of wisdom that I would give is that a clear path helps us feel less anxious, and a clear path when it comes to being successful,
Mhm.
right? Could show us the way, but it can also narrow your vision. So I'm going to say that again. A clear path shows the way, but it could also narrow your vision. So my advice is to be free, to trust and create new paths, new possibilities, and to stay open, to stay curious and to stay open. And if you create new paths, you have people that care for you, support you, right? You have your vision and you stay open, you too will be successful. You too will be successful.
I absolutely love it. Dr. Adamas, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation this evening.
Thank you so much.
So, thank you so much to everyone attending. We probably got time for one, maybe two questions. Dr. Adamas, would you be okay with that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so if you have a question, you can either pop on video and share your question or drop it in the chat. Either way. I'm seeing people very much loved your conversation tonight, Dr. Adamas. So that's awesome.
Great.
I really loved how you told about your experiences in psychology and how you started off. I really don't have a lot of experience in psychology, but I have some interest in specific topic that I didn't see a lot of people talk about. And I know that as an undergraduate student, it's better to start researching something on your own, and then expand it with the faculty later on as you excel through your undergraduate career. Would there be anything that you would suggest to focus on while researching something in the undergrad? When you want to study some topic, would you suggest to focus on focus on researching that by yourself, or would you suggest to find some faculty member that would give you advices? Or
Yeah.
what are the steps to build a really good base for the research?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. And what's your name?
My name's Victoria.
Victoria, nice to virtually meet you. I would say that that's a beautiful thing, right? You're curious, you want to learn about something. I would say to read. I think a lot of my research idea comes from reading, both reading within psychology and also outside psychology. And then I try to connect, whether it's, with a mentor, with even some of my own students, with a faculty member, right? And have a dialogue, have a conversation around that topic. And that way you could kind of try to see where both of your ideas might connect. And then that will take a life of its own. So that's one kind of quick way to kind of think about it. And the other piece is don't be afraid to ask, let's say if you're looking at graduate school, to just speak to different faculty members, because you'll be surprised, how folks might be interested in a topic that you might assume they're not interested in. So you never lose anything by asking, and continue to stay curious around your topic.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Dr. Adamas, another question came into the chat. Can you give an example of the barriers you faced in developing cultural identity and humility?
Gosh, we could spend another.
We could take another hour.
Do another hour just on that excellent one question. One of them that I'm going to say one that I've encountered when I was a graduate student. So, I'm a man. I'm an Afro-Latino. I'm a man of African descent and Latin descent. I'm also queer. I'm an immigrant. I have all these social groups that I'm part of. And I went to a very clinical program. And a lot of these topics were not discussed as much throughout my training. So I would often wanted to know, well, what would it mean in this context with this group, right? So I was always that student who was really curious about the social life of our minds. And oftentimes I would have, for example, supervisors who would tell me, well, you leave that outside of the room. You don't bring those, you don't bring politics, for example. I remember one supervisor told me, you don't bring politics into the room. And, that was really challenging, right? Because there's a power differential. And, my mind is like, well, how do I do that? And if so, show me. Of course, he couldn't show me, because we really can't leave the outside world outside when we're working with people, right? So one of my challenges as a graduate student was really thinking about, how does the outside world impact the client, and how do I make sense of that when I'm trying to create a treatment plan and to work with clients? Of course, fast forward a couple of years later, we're in a very different place today, but in many ways in graduate school. But then we are also now, if we're going to be really honest, practicing during a time when the government is telling us what words we can and cannot use, what theories we can and cannot use, right? I think we would be a little bit hypocrite if we don't talk about that elephant in the room. So it's really important. I tell my students today, as we're navigating all of this, I go back to our ethics, right? Because that keeps us grounded. And it's deeply knowing, right? Deeply knowing that the power, authority, and demands of the state can never relieve us of the individual ethical responsibility or our duty to support and defend human rights. And we're going to defend that human rights again and again and again. And the reason why I'm saying this is because in some ways I see a pattern resurfacing in terms of the message I received when I was a graduate student. And now we're receiving this message at a more bigger scale from the state. And it's really important for us as folks in the health profession to really stay grounded in our ethics, because at the end of the day, our work is about doing the human rights work. So I hope that makes sense at some level.
I think it makes beautiful sense. Stay grounded in your values and stay grounded in the ethics of the profession.
Absolutely.
Well, Dr. Adamas, thank you again. Loved our conversation. And thank you so much to everyone who was able to join us this evening. We have these events every month, so I hope you'll keep an eye out on our events page on the Chicago School website, and keep an eye on your email, because we'll send further notifications of upcoming events. Until next time, everyone, be well.